I mean, you're an expert. You tell me, if you had $500 million of cash right now, where would you invest it?
Здравейте! Аз съм Пламен Андонов, а това е българският криптоканал. На 27 август Winklevoss братята публикуваха тази статия, в която те обясняват защо според тях биткоин ще струва $500 000. Съответно, тъй като тази статия беше доста важна да бъде покрита и хората да получат информацията, която те показват там, направих този 30-минутен клип с заглавие "Биткоин ще струва $500 000, злато, петрол и долара не са добър инструмент за борбата с инфлацията". В края на статията братите споменават за фирмата Micro Strtegy, която започва да използва биткоин като главен резерв на фирмата. Ето го и самият твит, който анонсва тази нова. Micro Strtegy adopts Bitcoin as primary treasury reserve asset. И сега по-скорошна новина от септември 14, 2020 година. Те обявяват, че са закупили допълнителни 16 000 биткоина на стойност $175 милиона, като тотал до момента тази фирма вече притежава 38 000 биткоина, които те са закупили за $425 милиона, почти $500 милиард. И съответно Антони Помплиано прави този 1 час и 24 минутен подкаст с Майкъл Села, в който дискутират кога той се е запознал с биткоин, какъв е неговия бекграунд, как се е започнала фирмата Micro Strtegy и съответно как се стига до това решение те да инвестират резервата на фирмата, вместо да го държат в долари, в фиат пари, да го превърнат в биткоин.
Alright guys, bang bang, I have Mr. Michael Saylor here. You're an absolute legend, my friend.
I grew up in an Air Force family, lived on military bases my entire life. I went to MIT on an Air Force scholarship. I got a degree in astronautical engineering, studied spaceship design. While I was there, I got another degree in the history of science. I studied the structure of scientific revolutions and paradigm shifts, and became very fascinated with how new technologies get introduced. Learned to fly in the Air Force.
След това кратко интро за себе си, Майкъл започва да говори за това как е започнала фирмата Micro Strtegy. Като по това време той е работил като наемен работник за фирма и е напускал с идеята да започне вече собствената си фирма.
And I said, okay, so if you want me to stay, you're going to have to let me start my company. I think I got $250,000 in cash, $2.5 million of contracts. They let me hire 10 people from DuPont, give me free office space and computer equipment for the first 2 or 3 years. I took they said, we can't give you the money up front. You're just a 24-year-old. I said, you got to, because this is the only time this negotiating strategy ever works. I said, you got to give me the money because I have no money. They gave me the money. I thought, holy crap, I have $250,000. This is enough capital to last me for 7 years. So I figured 7 years, good, let's start. And so age 24, I started Micro Strtegy with the thought that I didn't want to work for anybody else. And when it failed, I would go back to college. And it never failed. In the first year, we did, 10 people, and then 20, and then we were 5 million, then we were 10 million, then we were 20 million, then we were 40 million. And at some point, we were 80 million, and then we kind of came to the market in the 96, 97 time frame, and the dot-com revolution's going crazy. Everybody's clamoring, you got to go public. So we came public in 1998. And then there was no going back. I got on the roller coaster. And so that's how I started Micro Strtegy.
После той набързо минава през това, че се е занимавал с покупка и продажба на домейни. Тъй като в началото е имало много домейни, които са били просто една дума и е можел да го купиш сравнително за ниска цена.
So back in 96, when the internet hit, you needed an email domain. So we bought microstrtegy.com. But I was too lazy. So I thought, why do I got to type microstrtegy.com? Why don't we buy strategy.com? So we went and we bought, back when no one cared, we bought strategy.com for like 50 grand. And then I thought, why don't we just start buying words? So we bought wisdom.com, and then we bought usher.com. And by the way, do you know who owns hope in the world?
No.
I own hope. Hope.com. Hope, Emma. I bought speaker. I bought alert. I bought angel. I bought alarm. I bought voice. I mean, and here's my thinking. You know, there are all these search engines, and if you go online and you search for voice, you get like 2 billion hits on Google. Okay, if you want to launch a company named Voice and you own voice.com, you go to the top of the list of the billion. And so my thinking was, if 5 billion people go to school and they learn how to spell alert or Emma, right? Emma, E-M-M-A. If they know how to spell that, then isn't that good for a brand? And so I started thinking about branding, and I launched a business, alarm.com. We eventually spun it off. It's a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company on the NASDAQ today. You know, we made some money. We didn't make the billions, but we made a lot of money off of it, like 30, 40 million. And then we launched another company. Alarm was all about integrating your home alarm system with the internet. You know? And then we launched another company called Angel. And Angel was like an early version of Siri. It was an interactive voice response from any telephone. Like an angel on your shoulder, talk to it and they respond. We eventually sold that for about 120 million.
И сега започват да коментират този твит, който е от 2013 година, където той казва, че дните на биткоин са преборени, което означава, че скоро се очаква този експеримент по това време просто вече да умре.
All right, so there's this tweet.
I just sold the domain.
There's this tweet that everyone is begging me to talk to you about, which is in, I think it's 2012 or 2013. You basically put out a tweet. So you're early because it's 2012, 2013 about Bitcoin. You're also on Twitter then, which was still pretty early for Twitter in general. And you basically tweet out, you know, kind of saying what I would consider a pretty down the fairway critique of Bitcoin, which is like, it's not going anywhere, right? Fast forward 7
online gambling, its days are numbered. Yeah.
So like 7, 8 years, and now you've got a material part of your balance sheet in Bitcoin. What happens? How does that happen?
Okay, Anthony, can I tell you the truth?
Of course.
I really am ashamed to say, I didn't know I tweeted it until the day that I tweeted that I bought 250 million worth of Bitcoin. And then I discovered the hive mind crypto Twitter consciousness, where all of a sudden they all went through all my tweets. They found it. They reminded me of it. They compared it. And I'm like, oh my God, I literally forgot I ever said that. And I took it as kind of like kind ribbing. Like I didn't get all worked up about it. I'm like, you're right. I was wrong. What an idiot I was. I wish I could go back and do it again.
Well, the part to me that was so funny about all of this is, one, you're right that the internet never forgets, right? And it sounds like you were using Twitter early on, how I use it, which is sometimes I literally tweet things and I tweet them for myself to remember what I'm thinking.
В канала често говоря за това как аз не харесвам инфлацията и как не съм съгласен, че ако спестяваш, реално ти постоянно губиш пари. И как според мен инфлацията не е 1, 2 или 3%, ами е много повече. И как често говоря, че може би цената на нещата в магазина не се вдигнали толкова много, но цената на недвижимите имоти се вдигнали много. И ако питаш един човек какво искаш, той никога не ти каза искам домати, искам сникърс. Той ти казва искам апартамент, искам къща. Хората искат малко по-големи неща, които по-трудно се купуват. А на такива неща цената им се вдига много по-бързо. И много се радвам, че Майкъл в този клип дискутира абсолютно същите мисли, каквито имам и аз.
Asset inflation goes through the roof, right? And you know, this entire conversation of inflation, it's really twisted because everybody talks about consumer prices, CPI, inflation. That we're not getting enough inflation. We're not getting enough inflation. Okay? Well, like you're not getting inflation on YouTube and Netflix streaming videos and candy bars manufactured by robots in factories and Domino's Pizza. You're getting inflation on everything you want. If you wanted an Ivy League education if you wanted a beachfront house in Miami, if you wanted the apartment in New York, if you wanted anything scarce, everything you want is going up 7%. And that's asset inflation. By the way, if I want a bond that's going to yield $50,000 a year, you know, it used to cost $1 million, and this year it cost $10 million. The cost of the asset went up by 2%. No, I have a house in Miami Beach. It was a nice house built in the 1930s, and I have the deed of sale for the house. $100,000 for that house in 1930. It's gone up in price by a factor of 100. It's like, you know, so no inflation, kind of inflation, but it's different. It's asset inflation. So I didn't really think about it until I got slugged in the face with the 2x4, which kind of happened around March or April, when Main Street shut down, the economy shut down, and bonds went through the roof. When municipal bonds went up while every city is bankrupt, when Apple stock and every other public tech equity went up, and the multiples blew out, and the economy went to the worst place I've seen in 30 years, at that point you start having a thought with yourself, which is, what is the true inflation rate? And we should probably coin a different term, right? If you looked at asset inflation on a good year for the last decade, it's 7% a year, normal, right? This year, you can make an argument it was 25%. Right? I mean, if you look at the long bond index and if you look at these equities, you can make an argument that the asset inflation rate leaped to 25 and 30%, depending. And now, what does that mean to me metaphorically? Well, here's how I feel. I felt like I had $500 million of cash in the bank, safe, and it was yielding 2-3%, and I'm ready for a rainy day, and then I'm starting to do stuff with it. And then every month, some banker sends me a note saying the interest went down, it went down. Now there is no interest. And then someone took my cash out of the bank and they put it in the backyard in pallets, and then they opened my back gate. And then every month someone comes along and starts burning 2% of the money. And then I started thinking, well, you know, in 12 months, 25% of the money is going to be gone. And then, you know, then I started thinking, what is the point of all this? What am I doing wrong? And of course, the answer is you can't hold cash. And so what do you do with it, right?
И вече преминават към темата. Добре, разбираме, има инфлация, имаш проблеми с загуба на пари, на спестяването на фирмата, на резерва. Как се стига до решението, че трябва конкретно биткойн да купиш, а не недвижимо имущество или злато или сребро или други ценни метали?
I mean, you're an expert. You tell me, if you had $500 million of cash right now, where would you invest it?
I'm cheating because you and I see eye to eye now. I'd go buy a lot of Bitcoin.
Okay. And so if you didn't know what you know, but you were an intelligent person and you watched YouTube and you watched everything else, what would be your laundry list of assets to consider investing in?
Yeah, it basically be all the inflation hedge assets, right? You look at everything from real estate, precious metals, Bitcoin. You kind of just go down the line, hard assets that have some sort of inflation hedge type qualities that really are more kind of wealth preservation than anything would be the general bucket to at least go start exploring with, right?
Okay, so let's tick through them. Commercial real estate. How do you go buy $500 million worth of commercial real estate at a fair price that's not an impaired asset by something happening in the economy right now? How many people want to sell you commercial real estate at a fair price right now that is not impaired?
They all think it's still worth what it was worth in January.
Okay, so that, you know, that's kind of difficult. So what's my next thing? Go buy, I'm not so silly as to go buy like 20th century stocks. Go buy Apple, Amazon, Facebook, you know, Twitter. Oh, by the way, back in 2012, I wrote the mobile wave. You know what I said in the mobile wave? I said, go buy Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Twitter. It was a good idea in 2012. If you had done it then, you would have made 10 times your money. Very good idea. Not the same idea this week, right? I mean, at this point, you know, is Apple computer going to go up by a factor of 10 from here? Right? Maybe it might double, it might be cut in half, but you know, you're with the best equity in the world, you've got equal upside, downside. You're really just...
Yeah, there's no asymmetric payoff.
В следващия сегмент дискутират как всяка успяла фирма е фирма, която се концентрира върху технологията.
You buy them when they're $100 billion market cap. When something hits $100 billion, and when they're 10 times bigger than the next biggest thing, and they're $100 billion, they're probably going to crush everything. And at that point, like, you know, I remember lecturing Wall Street guys in 2011, 2012 about Apple, you know, and here's what they said. They said, well, we know you love Apple and you think it's going to beat the world. But, you know, our idea is if Apple goes up too high, we're going to sell the stock and we're going to buy HP and Dell so we can diversify your computer portfolio. And then if all your tech names, if Apple and Amazon and Facebook go up too much, we're going to sell those so you don't get too much in technology. Okay, and my answer was, what you know, if you think about it broadly, there's no example of a successful company in the history of the world that wasn't a technology company. Standard Oil was a technology company. If you go to Hershey's factory, you'll find they figured out how to manufacture 50,000 candy bars in a clean room, and it's the most sophisticated piece of technology you will ever see in your life. You think they're not technology companies, you're just ignorant. There is no winning investment in a company that's not a technology company at their time. General Electric, there was a time when electricity was interesting technology. Boeing, same thing before we could fly. So the idea you sell too much tech is a foolish idea, in my opinion. The idea that you sell Apple when it gets too big is another foolish idea. Like, well, there's never been a company that was 500 billion in market cap. What? Or trillion, right? There are people saying that. There's never been a company as valuable as Apple because there's never been a company as valuable as Apple.
На всеки човек, който не разбира биткоин, главният му аргумент е, че биткоин може да бъде копиран, пейснат и заради това вече съществуват 10 000 други валути. Съответно, биткоин няма никаква стойност, просто защото е супер лесно, тъй като е нещо дигитално, да бъде дубликирано и може да направиш безкрай много копия. Но преди Micro Strtegy да решат да инвестират $500 милиарда в криптовалутата биткоин и да я използват за резерв, най-вероятно са проучили въпроса много добре. Така че ако вие се съмнявате дали сложите вашите 500 лева в биткоин и главният ви проблем е, че той може да бъде копи-пейснат, замислете се защо тези хора слагат $500 милиона и не се притесняват за същия този проблем.
And here's the thing that really just kicks you over the edge though. It's just when you go to real Bitcoin dominance and you look at Bitcoin and then Bitcoin Cash and then the next one, you realize, okay, Bitcoin is 92% of everything. And the next competitor is 2%. And then the next competitor is 1.5%. Okay? The number one knock on Bitcoin is, well, maybe it's the MySpace, the Facebook. It's like, absolutely not. If you know anything about MySpace, you realize that MySpace was never worth more than $1 billion. Okay? MySpace was 200 times smaller than Bitcoin is right now. It was never that case. Right? There's never an example of $100 billion monster digital network that was vanquished once it got to that dominant position. So all you got to do is see that chart, and then you think about the dynamic and the network effect, and you're like, this is already won. Right? It's won. It's been tested, and you know. And by the way, the hard forks I think are a big advantage. The fact that Bitcoin went through it. And we saw what happened, and we saw that the community would defend Bitcoin. That's what gives a person like me confidence to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin. I don't want to hear that you've got a new idea and you're upset over transaction fees and you would like to implement smart contracts, so you got to change everything. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that you're going to defend the network to the death against someone that's going to break it or compromise it in any way, shape, or form.
When you decide personally, this is a good idea, I'm going to take a material amount of the $500 million and I'm going to go buy Bitcoin with it. You've got a board, you've got shareholders, you've got regulators. There's a number of kind of stakeholders, right? That people who either have financial interest in what you're doing or really care about what you're doing from a regulatory standpoint. What are those conversations like? Do you just go to the board and say, hey, there's this thing called Bitcoin, I'm going to take $250 million, I'm going to go buy it? Do you kind of warm them up with some information first? Like what is that conversation at the board level like?
I start assigning them homework. And they all know you. So they've all watched a variety of your podcasts. They all know Andreas. They all required to watch the debate between Eric Voorhees and Peter Schiff on gold, on fiat versus Bitcoin. What is better money, right? And then a nonstop stream of essays, on macroeconomics and Bitcoin theory, and the who's who litany of people you've interviewed. Mm-hmm. When Alden publishes her piece, it goes to my board. And the bullish case for Bitcoin goes to the board. All of those things, and between them and the general counsel and the CFO and myself, we're all basically just going down the rabbit hole. And following that is a series of discussions.
Хората са прекарали месеци в проучване на въпроса, в четена литература и гледане на разговори на други хора по тази тема, преди да вземат решението и преди да са сигурни, че това, което правят, е правилно. В следващия сегмент започва да дискутират как се купува биткоин за половин милиард долара, без да преместиш цената. Защото в един момент, ако един такъв голям играч иска да купи много биткоини бързо, това, което ще се получи един спайк, едно повишаване на цената нагоре. За да не се случи това, работят екипи от хора, които извършват стотици хиляди малки покупки. Само за да може да се изкупи цялото това огромно количество, което те искат да купят, без да преместят цената дори с 1 цент.
If you're going to buy that much, you're going to buy it in thousands or tens of thousands or 100,000 plus small transactions, day and night, minute by minute, over the course of many days. So it's not like we're going in. I'll sit and I'll watch this happening, and I've got a great team. A great team that I've worked with and some excellent professionals. They are brilliant geniuses at what they do. But let me tell you, they've got great technology too, right? It's like, and you got to have the right technology, you got to have the right team, and then you have to be very patient, like very, very patient. We bought $425 million worth of it, and we never ran the price. Not a dollar. Like, you don't know.
Pretty impressive. Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
If I'm in the market, you wouldn't know that I'm trading against you ever, because that's not how you get stuff done, right? Let the market come to you. So the good news is, if you want to buy hundreds of millions or sell hundreds of millions, you can do it and not be seen, and you can do it without moving the market materially or panicking anybody. But you have to have the right team, the right tools, and the right discipline. You can't be in a hurry.
Ако гледате този клип в момента и сте стигнали до тук, сте един от много малкото хора, които се интересуват от биткоин и от криптовалути и разбират какво се случва в момента с всичкото това принтиране на пари.
I think that people were kind of oblivious to the need / the role of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin narrative of digital gold, right? This is the ultimate inflation hedge. This is if it's not 10x better than gold, it's 100x. Maybe it's 1,000x better than gold. We could go on for hours. I could tell you why I think it's 1,000x better than gold. the other point, right, that's not lost upon me is there's 3,500 publicly traded companies. There's $5 trillion in their treasuries, and it's all melting. And yeah, at some point you have a fiduciary obligation to not lose the money. Okay, like it used to be acceptable to be conservative, but that was before the asset inflation rate went from 6% to 30%. When the inflation rate goes to 30%, it's not necessarily something you can ignore. So I think that a lot of people are getting catalyzed right now. I think it has to be kind of CEO, CFO led, right? Because it is an innovative thing. But I think that we've shown people how to do it, and we've shown them that it's possible and straightforward. And once it's like anything, if I tell you it's possible, go figure it out on the internet or go figure it out on YouTube. You can figure it out yourself, right? All you got to know is that it's possible. It's possible to run 52 miles in a single day. Go figure it out. You're going to go Google 52 miles in a single day, and then all of a sudden fall down the rabbit hole. So I think people now know it's possible.
Нещо много важно, което тук казва Майкъл. Те са първата фирма, която прави това. Но това, което показва, е един прецедент. Възможно е. Ако искаш, можеш да закупиш биткойн легално, напълно според законите, и това да ти бъде резерв асета на фирмата. Те са първата фирма, която го правят, и на тях им е било най-трудно. Но от тук нататък на всяка следваща фирма, след като веднъж им е доказано, че това е възможно, просто трябва малко да гугълнат и да проучат въпроса.
How are you thinking about the volatility, right? So obviously, it's one of the most volatile assets that you could have chosen. And when we talk about volatility, it's not like, hey, it may go up 2% or down 2%. You can have double-digit percentage days, up or down. Does that change your strategy? Is this just your long-term holding it for, years and years? Kind of, how do you think about that?
Well, so first of all, I think the volatility is falling. And I think all you got to do is look at the chart. And there's a narrative, like everybody wants to say that they know something about crypto, wants to jump up and say, well, it's volatile. Well, it was volatile in 2017, when like individuals were trading it on their mobile phone. But yeah, think about what I just said about how we acquired it. We buy $175 million. I'm in the market every minute of the day for multiple days in a row. I'm damping the volatility. One person like me, right? In every trading day that I'm in the market, I'm damping it to the upside and the downside, and I'm damping it with large sums of money, right? And so how many institutions does it take before they damp it, right? Like I'm the dude, I'm like, okay, I'll pay an extra whatever, but stop this thing. I'm holding it for 100 freaking years, right? It's like, I'm not the day trader guy that's worried about it. So I think that as the institutions come in and as they buy bigger amounts, they're damping the volatility. And that's my first observation. My second observation is crypto trades 168 hours a week. Every other asset trades 35 hours a week at best, and sometimes less on holidays, right? You're trading. I look at this thing in awe. When I look at these exchanges, Saturday night, 9:30 p.m., and I'm watching the thing stream, and I'm like, this is the most magical, hardest working security in the history of the world. And I would think everybody ought to be in awe that the thing's not going haywire. It's remarkably non-volatile in that regard. Like, in my opinion, you could go into the market and you could liquidate $50 or $100 million worth of this stuff in a matter of an hour, any hour of the day, any day of the week, on a holiday, and maybe you take a 3% haircut. But go try to liquidate $100 million of gold on a Saturday afternoon in Istanbul on the street side. So that my answer is, I don't think it's that volatile. But my other answer, beyond this, let's be honest, there's a negative real yield on everything else I can buy. Okay, gold's got a negative 3, 4, 5% real yield, in my opinion. We talk about why. Bonds have a negative real yield. It's just a question. We're just going to debate, is it a 7% asset inflation or 15% or 3%? But it doesn't really matter. Every other non-volatile asset is a negative real yield, which means that everything else is lifeblood draining out of my veins. So if my choice would be to accept some volatility and live, or I had non-volatile cash that bought 30% less in a matter of 8 weeks, non-volatile that was 30% less, at that rate, you're not going to make it through the decade. And so volatility is just something you got to live with. But I really think there's a group of crypto enthusiasts that lived the last 10 years. And they are the result of their experience. They lived through a difficult time and they're heroes, and I respect them. But you live through that, you live through volatility. I think the next 10 years are not going to look like that. I think the next 10 years, as you have people coming in that are moving hundreds of millions of dollars in and out of the market, they're going to tend to damp all the volatility, and the institutions are going to damp it because in their interest. And so if there is any, it's just going to be to the upside for the good of everybody, and otherwise not a big problem for me.
Какво невероятно интервю, какъв невероятен подкаст. Този човек наистина е проучил въпроса, разбира икономиката, казва, въобще не ме притеснява това, че цената се мени често, и много ми хареса как каза, докато традиционните пазари може да търгуваш 40 часа седмицата, в петък затварят, понеделник отново отварят. Той каза, това нещо работи в събота в 9:30 вечерта. Направо се чудиш как изобщо не подскача повече нагоре и надолу, при положение, че работи 24 часа денонощието постоянно, и в стоковия пазар, ако цената се промени с твърде голям процент за един ден, те затварят пазара. Затварят пазара, за да се поуспокоят малко хората. Ако ви е харесал това интервю, ако ви е харесал хайлайтите, които подбрах, в края на краищата този клип става вече близо 30 минути, но нямаше как да съкратя повече. Наистина важните части от интервюто са поне половината, заради това исках да направя клипа. Просто повече хора, колкото се може повече хора трябва да гледат това интервю, тези важни части, и да видят какво е мнението на огромна фирма, която се води от много запознати хора, от бизнес хора. Това не е държавна работа, където свършиш си добре работа, не си свършиш, няма значение, ще ти дойде заплатата. Това е частна фирма. Тя, когато направи грешно решение, тя ще фалира. Това са хора, които не да се залагат репутацията на линия, те се залагат буквално хляба, буквално труда от последните 30 години. Споделете клипа, пратете го на своите приятели, които не вярват в биткойн, не виждат смисълът в биткойн, и просто им кажете, ето това е мнението на един мултимилионер.